My sister locked my sick son in a freezing basement during a birthday party. Now dad cut her from his trust fund, and her husband won't let her near their child. I never imagined my own sister, someone I trusted completely, would do something so cruel to my child. But life can shock you in the worst ways. Kara, my older sister, had always been the responsible one. Our parents praised her for her organizational skills, and after our mother passed away, Dad relied on her for many family matters. That's why what happened at her son's birthday party was so unbelievable. Her son and mine, Noah, are the same age, 8. They go to the same school, share friends, and usually get along well. When she invited Noah to the party, I warned her he wasn't feeling great, just a bit tired and coughing, but he begged me to let him go. Kara assured me she'd keep an eye on him. A few hours after dropping him off, I tried calling to check in, but Kara ignored every call and text. My wife and I grew uneasy, so we cut our afternoon short and headed to her house. When we arrived, most guests had already left and kids were playing in the living room, but Noah wasn't there. I asked Kara where he was and she froze. "Oh, he left early," she stammered. That made no sense. Then she changed her story. "He's resting in another room." Something felt off. When I insisted on seeing him, she tried to stop me. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I followed her down the hall until we reached the basement door. A cold draft hit me as Kara, visibly shaking, finally confessed. He wouldn't stop whining about feeling sick. I thought he was faking it to ruin the party, so I put him in timeout, in the basement. My blood ran cold. Noah had been locked in a freezing basement for hours. Worse, Kara had taken his phone so he couldn't call for help. She ignored my calls, assuming we were overreacting, then got too caught up in the party and forgot about him completely. My wife and I practically shoved Kara aside to open the basement door. We found Noah sitting on the cold concrete floor, leaning against the wall. He looked half-conscious, shivering, with vomit stains on the floor nearby. His face was pale, and his eyes were watery from tears. The basement had no proper heating, so it felt like a refrigerator. I gently picked him up. He tried to speak, but only managed a weak mumble. I was furious and scared at the same time. Furious at my sister's heartlessness, scared for my son's health. My wife wrapped Noah in her coat. We stormed out the back door to avoid any lingering guests and hurried him to the hospital, not caring what Kara or anyone else thought. Kara followed us in her own car, despite my shouting that she was the last person I wanted near my family. We reached the emergency room and the medical team took Noah in for evaluation. He was dehydrated and had an elevated temperature. The doctor said it looked like a case of severe food poisoning or possibly a viral infection, worsened by being cold and unattended for hours. While we waited, Kara kept trying to apologize. I refused to acknowledge her. The mother bear and my wife was about 2 seconds away from strangling Kara. My father arrived, along with Kara's husband, let's call him Mark, both looking frantic because Kara had told no one the full truth. She just said, "Something happened with Noah and we're at the hospital." When Dad and Mark demanded answers, I didn't hold back. I explained every ugly detail. Kara turned beet red, stuttering feeble excuses. "He was faking. I thought he'd be fine. I didn't realize he was so sick." My father's face grew stone cold. Mark yelled at Kara, calling her cruel and irresponsible. Everyone looked appalled. Then Dad dropped the bombshell. "I was planning on setting up a trust fund for my 2 kids, Kara and you, but after this, I've changed my mind. I'm leaving everything to my grandkids and to you, not her." His words stunned everyone. Kara burst into tears, pleading with Dad to reconsider, but he was done. "My grandson nearly ended up in serious danger because of you," he told her, voice shaking. "You don't deserve a reward for that." I felt 1,000 conflicting emotions swirl inside me. Relief that Dad was on my side, guilt that the family was breaking apart, rage at Kara for harming Noah, sympathy for Mark, who looked shell-shocked that his wife had basically endangered a child for the sake of a party. It was all too much. Noah recovered over the next couple of days, though he was traumatized. He had nightmares about being trapped in a cold, dark room. We gave him lots of love and reassurance, telling him we'd protect him and never let anything like that happen again. Meanwhile, Kara kept trying to contact me, flooding my phone with apologies. She claimed it was a one-time mistake, that she was just stressed from party planning. She asked me to talk to Dad to reverse his decision on the trust fund. Her husband, Mark, was equally furious. He told her to stay away from their own son until she got professional help. He believed she had a serious problem controlling her temper and her judgment. Apparently, there were smaller incidents before, her snapping at their child or overreacting to minor infractions. But no one had guessed she could escalate to outright neglecting a sick child in a locked basement. I ignored Kara's pleas, focusing on Noah and on regaining my own emotional balance. Deep down, part of me felt uneasy about Dad's drastic measure to remove her from the trust. I never asked him for money, never demanded more than my share. Dad was simply outraged and wanted to punish her. But did she deserve total financial disinheritance? The truth is, I couldn't bring myself to pity Kara. She had turned the party into a horror show for my son. But the swirl of moral confusion weighed on me. My father, on the other hand, was resolute. He said, "I can't trust Kara to handle any family inheritance responsibly. She's proven she has a cruel streak." A week passed, and Noah was almost fully recovered physically. Mentally, he still had flashbacks. He'd say things like, "Dad, promise you won't leave me somewhere I can't call you." Hearing that stabbed me in the heart every time. Meanwhile, Kara kept texting, apologizing, begging for forgiveness, but also for Dad's trust fund reinstatement. She sounded more worried about money than actually making amends. That only solidified my anger. At first, I wanted to block her entirely, but a part of me clung to the memory of how close we were after Mom passed away. We had grown closer, or so I believed, so I didn't block her immediately. I let her messages come, read them, but rarely replied. Family members suggested I go to the authorities about what Kara did. They said leaving a child in a cold basement, ignoring his calls for help, was borderline child abuse. The more I thought about it, the more I realized they were right, especially because she has a kid of her own, and who knows if she's ever done something similar. My father also worried about her temper. He'd caught her snapping at her child before, though never to this extent. I decided to consult my wife, my dad, and a couple of good friends in social services. They all said it might be wise to contact CPS, not out of revenge, but to ensure Kara gets help or oversight. If she's truly remorseful, she might cooperate, go to counseling, and learn better parenting skills. If she's not, then professional intervention might be the only way to protect her own child. The thought of turning my sister in was terrifying, but leaving the situation unaddressed felt worse. It took me about 2 weeks to make up my mind. During that time, Noah was basically back to normal physically, but my anger kept growing every time I remembered his tear-streaked, shivering face in that basement. Finally, I reached out to a friend in the foster care system, who guided me on how to file a report. After considering all angles, I decided to do it. Kara had lost my trust. She proved capable of neglect in a moment of anger. Maybe official involvement would push her to get therapy or realize the seriousness of her actions. Soon after the report was filed, a caseworker contacted me. She asked detailed questions about the incident, Noah's medical records, and whether I believed Kara's own child might be at risk. My wife and I explained everything, showing proof that we'd had to rush Noah to the ER, how Kara refused to answer calls, how she blocked Noah from contacting me. The caseworker listened carefully, took notes, and thanked us for the information. She said there would be an investigation into Kara's home environment. I won't lie, the process made me sick to my stomach. Kara is my sister, and I never thought I'd be in a position to involve CPS, but I kept reminding myself it was the right thing for the safety of all kids involved. A few days later, my sister blew up my phone again. She was furious that I betrayed her by bringing in CPS. She accused me of trying to destroy her life, making it impossible for her to keep friends or community standing if people found out. She even said, "You're doing this for Dad's money, aren't you? You're making me look unfit so he'll kick me out of the trust fund." That was the last straw. I blocked her on every platform. My father supported me 100%. He said if the CPS visit led to counseling or classes for Kara, that would be good for her. He also repeated that his trust fund decision was final. She wouldn't be included, and I would be. I confronted Dad about it, feeling uneasy. "Are you sure this is the right thing? You originally planned to leave your estate to your grandkids, and I never asked for anything extra." Dad told me that after losing Mom, he'd been thinking of setting aside money for both Kara and me, in addition to the grandkids. He had done well financially, lived modestly, and had more than he needed, but seeing Kara's actions made him realize she wasn't trustworthy. He reassured me that the money wasn't the main issue. He wanted to ensure resources went to people who wouldn't do harm. "Kara will be fine," he said. "She works. Her husband works. They'll survive. She won't starve, but this is about principle now." The CPS worker eventually visited Kara, spoke to her husband, interviewed her son, and inspected the basement. From what I heard, Kara cooperated, crying and apologizing the entire time. The worker concluded that while Kara's behavior was indeed negligent and harmful, it might have been a one-time extreme lapse, so the recommended course was mandatory counseling and parenting classes. Kara was also told not to have any unsupervised visits with my child unless I agreed, which I absolutely do not. Mark told me he was relieved the consequences weren't more severe. He admitted that at first he'd considered divorce, but realized he'd rather try to fix things with therapy. They also began marriage counseling. As for me, I still didn't speak to Kara. She remained blocked. Maybe time would heal some wounds, but for now, I had no desire to see her face. Weeks turned into a couple of months. My father refused to talk to Kara. He expected an apology, but was too furious to be the first to reach out. Kara, from what I've heard through relatives, was torn between pride and regret. She felt Dad was punishing her too severely, but ironically, she never truly apologized to him directly or showed real insight into how dangerous her actions were. Meanwhile, my wife and I focused on Noah's well-being. He's a resilient kid. He soon returned to normal routines like playing video games, doing homework, and even hanging out with his cousin at school. I made it clear to the school that my child was not to be picked up by anyone except me or my wife. That might sound drastic, but I wasn't taking any chances. Noah and his cousin still get along. They're too young to fully grasp the family drama. I decided not to punish the cousin for Kara's wrongdoing, so we let them remain friends at school. If they want to hang out, I insist it happens on neutral ground, like a local park or my house, with proper supervision. Over time, this might change, but for now, it's the best I can do. Recently, I heard from Mark, my brother-in-law, that Kara's counseling was going well. She apologized to him and their own son, and he agreed to let her have supervised interactions. Mark also mentioned she felt terrible about what happened to Noah. She didn't want to push me, but she wondered if she could ever be around him again. I hesitated. The memory of Noah trembling in that cold basement still haunts me, but I also realize people can change if they truly put in the effort. My father, however, is unwavering. He says, let her prove she's changed. That might take a long time. And I agree. Still, kids have a way of moving forward faster than adults do. Noah told me he misses going to his cousin's house. He said, Dad, I know Aunt Kara messed up, but can I at least hang out with my cousin sometimes? I assured him that I wasn't cutting his cousin out of his life, but we needed to be very cautious about Aunt Kara. It's been a couple of months now. My sister and I are civil at best. We've talked a little through Mark, but direct contact is minimal. She's in therapy, and from what Dad says, she shows some remorse. I don't know if I'll ever see her the same way again. The trust she broke can't be mended with a few tears and apologies. As for Dad's trust fund, that remains changed in my favor. Kara is completely cut out, replaced by me and the grandkids. Some relatives said Dad overreacted, while others believe Kara got off easy. I've decided not to dwell on it. It's his money. He's free to decide who benefits from it. And if Kara truly reforms, maybe he'll reconsider in the distant future, or maybe not. That's between them. My wife and I choose to focus on Noah's healing. He's a bright kid, and we're grateful he recovered without lasting physical harm. Emotionally, he still has occasional nightmares, but they're less frequent. Being with his friends and living a normal routine helps a lot. I'm sharing this story to highlight that even people you trust deeply, like a beloved sister, can do something shocking when stress or resentment bubbles up. Sometimes the best step for everyone, including them, is to bring in outside help like CPS or therapy. It's better than pretending everything is fine. Do I regret letting Noah go to that party when he was feeling under the weather? I do sometimes, but I never expected my sister to lock him away instead of, calling me. That part still feels surreal, like a nightmare. Yet here we are, dealing with the aftermath. All in all, I've learned a lot about how quickly family ties can be tested. My father's decision to remove Kara from his trust fund might sound harsh, but from his perspective, it's a direct response to seeing his grandchild endangered. Kara's husband now keeps a tight eye on her interactions, so she won't be alone with their son until everyone is sure she's truly changed. I want to end this with a note of cautious optimism. Kara's child still loves his mom, and I hope she becomes a better parent for his sake. If she manages to rebuild her life and fix her mindset, maybe one day we'll reconcile fully. For now, though, this is where we stand. My sister locked my sick son in a cold basement and nearly caused him serious harm, so Dad cut her out of the trust fund. Her husband won't let her near their kid unsupervised, and she's left dealing with the consequences of her own actions. I'm just grateful that my son is safe, that we have the resources to help him move past this trauma, and that, in the end, Dad's strong reaction might push Kara to get the help she needs.